And welcome this evening to Goats and Rings. I am your host, Walt Stringer, Senior Draft Scout from the East West Football Network, and tonight I am joined by a colleague of mine, Mr. Steven Sanchez, also who covers college football and the betting scene. So for everyone who's trying to be a degenerate, this man right here, he has everything you need.
Appreciate that, Walt. Glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yep. So tell the people a little bit about yourself, Steve.
All right. My name's Steven Sanchez. I'm 31. I live out here in New Jersey. Big time Giants fan. I follow all the major sports, if you will, with my Knicks, my Mets, and Rangers in hockey. Just started with East West football back in May. I'm a freelance writer. I've been writing articles on betting. And I'm going to be covering the college football season this year in terms of recapping scores for the Power 5 conferences. Just trying to, work on the craft. So just a little bit about me.
Cool. So first and foremost, let's jump into the preseason week 1.
Sir.
Who were some of the guys that really stood out to you?
So there was 2 guys in particular. I know a lot of the talk for preseason week 1 was the debut of the rookie quarterbacks, which you'll touch on in a moment. But one of the guys that really caught my eye was a second-year quarterback, Tua Tagovailoa, on the Miami Dolphins. Last year was a little bit of a rocky situation where Ryan Fitzpatrick was the starter. He was benched, even though the team was doing well in favor of Tua, with some mixed results. And then Ryan Fitzpatrick obviously left in the offseason and signed with the Washington football team, leaving the keys in the hands of Tua to be the guy. Before even week 1 of the preseason, there were still rumors that he could have been moved potentially for Deshaun Watson. Obviously, we know now that the legal situation is still pending. So this was a good opportunity for Tua to really show that he can be trusted as the guy moving forward. They do have a deep roster, and he came out firing. I was really impressed with his pocket presence. He evaded pressure a couple times. He had really good feet. There was a beautiful pass that he completed over to Mike Gesicki that went for 50 yards. The only really blemish on the day for him was the end zone interception that he threw. He just kind of forced it in the middle of the field, which you really don't want to do. But other than that, he looked really, 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 really good. I'm excited to see more of him, especially working with his full cast at wide receiver. And then the other play that really caught my eye on defense was the rookie Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah from the Cleveland Browns. Yeah. This is a guy that was talked about as a potential top 20 pick. And he slipped all the way to the second round, like deep in the second round, and found out that he was dealing with some heart condition, I believe, is what they were reporting. And there was also questions about where his fit was in the scheme, whether he could fit in at linebacker or at safety. According to what I saw, 38 of his 47 snaps were in the box, and he finished with 8 tackles, 1 sack, and 3 tackles for a loss. So that was really impressive by him. There's really a chance that the Browns may have gotten a big-time steal in Jeremiah. So those are the 2 guys that really stood out to me for first week of preseason.
Yeah, I agree. I think Tua looks a lot stronger in the pocket. That ball seems to have a lot more snap on it from what I've seen so far. And I agree. He made some pretty good throws. Don't care too much about the red zone interception. No one really cares about preseason interceptions, period, unless you're throwing them in bunches. But yeah, I'm hoping for the best for him. I think Tua went through a rough rookie season. He had a vet breathing over his back the entire preseason, his entire season there in general. And then to deal with the fact that when the draft process rolled around, you had to deal with hearing, is Justin Fields going to become a Dolphin? So there was a lot going around to it. He had to kind of put up or shut up this offseason. He had to prove it to that locker room, and so far, it's only 1 game in preseason. So, yeah, it looks like he's doing it so far. Yep.
That's right.
And that's as far for him, man, Jeremiah. It's great for him. It's great that he fell in that position in Cleveland, what he's surrounded with. I think we'll get a little deeper into Cleveland later on in the show.
Yep,
But yeah, I agree. I'm happy for him. I hope he can stay healthy and he could truly be a steal for the Browns, especially in that system.
for
So,
sure.
but yeah, as far as me now going back into this past week, I'm gonna stay in that same game. I'm gonna stay with Justin Fields. I think Justin started out kind of rough. He had a handful of ugly possessions, but he managed to get things together going into the half. He had that 40-second drive within the last 40 seconds to get them in field goal range. He got pretty hot the second half. You can see he was kind of galvanized around the entire team. He oozes confidence. Everything got together. He started completing passes, and things got together. Now, it was a lot of dinking and dunking. He was 14 of 20 for 142, and he had 2 touchdowns, 1 on the ground. So I love what I saw from him. He took exactly what they gave him. That was a very good secondary he went against. A couple of those big time throws he had downfield early were drops. Well, not necessarily drops, but they were like highly contested throws that he put on the money, but guys aren't getting open. So you got to believe that once he has Allen Robinson there consistently week in, week out, that's going to be his number one stud.
For
So,
sure.
yep, I was happy with that. I was also happy with Carolina, Terrace Marshall. And Marshall wasn't my number one receiver. I believe I had Marshall as the 4th or 5th receiver off the board coming out of the draft. But he impressed me a lot. It was 3 catches for 88 yards. He had 3 catches on 5 targets. He had the 60-plus yard catch. And he's looking like a stud. A lot of people don't know he was coming out of high school. He was the number 1 wide receiver, I believe, coming out of high school, wide receiver recruit. He went to LSU, kind of got lost in the sauce there because who doesn't? You know, LSU is stacked with
Right.
wide receivers year in, year out. So he's a guy who could turn out to be better in the pros than he was in college, given the fact that he's getting a bigger opportunity. Because I believe he's what Carolina really needs. You know, you got DJ Moore. I love DJ Moore. He's a tough, strong, compact guy who can play outside. He can play inside. He's great after the catch. Robbie Anderson is a speed demon, but they really don't have that big number 1 type receiver guy who can do everything, intermediate routes, shorts, deeps. So I believe Terrace Marshall showed a lot also, and the potential is definitely there for him.
I agree with you there, Walt. I think Terrace Marshall was another guy that had some questions regarding a knee. I think that kind of forced him to maybe drop down a little bit. I know being a Giants fan, I was kind of pushing for him as well. I really do believe in his skill set. And I think he might even be better than the guy that they lost in Curtis Samuel in that system. It gives Sam Darnold another weapon to throw to. So, really impressive showing by Terrace Marshall. And I mean, who knows? He might even have a better rookie year than Jamar Chase. I mean, the NFL is weird as we know it. So, that's bold, but hey.
Yeah, that's bold considering who these guys' quarterbacks are. I think Joe, man, I'm interested in seeing how Joe holds up this season.
Yeah.
But if he's healthy, he's going to force feed Jamar a lot of targets.
Yep, a lot of targets to go around, and a lot of.
You look at Terrace with the Carolina Panthers. You know, you got to split passes up with DJ Moore and Robbie Anderson, and amongst the other guys, you got Christian McCaffrey, who they're getting back. That's 2,000. That's 1,000 yards receiving, 1,000 yards, rushing.
Oh yeah,
coming back. That's a lot of dominance in the offense coming back for Carolina. So it's going to be tough for him, I think, his rookie year. But if he can make the most of his opportunities with Carolina, he could have a solid rookie season.
Yeah, no, I agree with you, Walden. The other player that you mentioned, Justin Fields, I came away impressed too by him. Kid seems like he has a big chip on his shoulder, and it's going to be a difficult choice for Matt Nagy to make for week 1. So we'll see what happens there. But so far, pretty impressive.
True. All right. So moving on, we will take a quick look at the 2022 defensive tackle draft class. Now, I'm going to say this off the top. From right now, where we're standing at in mid-August, late August, I'm nowhere near as high on this defensive tackle class as I was last year's class. But last year's class did kind of grow on me as the season unfolded. You had a guy like Marvin Wilson who started last preseason as a consensus All-American and a top 10 to top 20 pick, and he wound up going undrafted. So it just proves to you we really don't know.
Right.
But right now, a guy, DeMarvin Leal.
Yep.
What are your initial thoughts on Leal? Because when I watch him, and I've watched him a lot the past couple seasons, followed him a lot, he strikes me as a guy that's sort of Ed Oliverish in the sense that I'm good enough at pretty much I can line up at 0 for a few plays. I can play
Mm-hmm.
some 1, some 2, some 3. I can even play some 4.
Yep.
I can rush the outside at some 5 technique. Whatever you want me to do, I can do it. But I'm not going to be elite at any of them. Now, I could be completely wrong, but like initially, this is what DeMarvin Leal strikes me as. What do you think about DeMarvin Leal?
Yeah, I agree with you, Walt. I think he's kind of like a jack of all trades, master of none kind of guy. He is very explosive. It seems like he does have versatility. For Texas A&M, they can line him up on the outside, and they can also line him up on inside. One of the players that he reminds me of a bit is Jeffrey Simmons on the Tennessee Titans. Kind of a similar stature. Simmons seems to have probably like 10 more pounds on him, but definitely somebody that could penetrate the pocket and has an explosive first step. He's going to be difficult to block. Is he Aaron Donald? No. But this is a guy that could kind of flirt with maybe 10 sacks a year and just be a disruptor. In terms of comparing it a little bit to last year, we didn't see a defensive tackle get taken until the second round. And DeMarvin,
Barmore.
Right, who went to the Patriots. And I think that was the first time since like 2017 that a defensive tackle wasn't drafted in the first round. So for Leal to be in that conversation to potentially be top 10, I think stands out. But again, we'll just have to wait and see how he performs this year to see if he ups his game, or maybe his ceiling's capped at that point.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at this class, there's a chance, comparing it to last year, that we may not have a guy other than him. And I think that's kind of based on the season that Leal has. He may slip, just for the simple fact that with the current state of the NFL, defensive tackles really aren't at a high premium that high early. Unless you're a dominant rusher, you're just pretty much a jack of all trades and you're great at all of them. But pretty much unless you're a 3-tech, you have to be a 3-tech and up really nowadays to get drafted that high. And if you look at guys who went last year, Aleem McNeil was probably the number 1 nose tackle in the draft, and he didn't get drafted until the 3rd round by the Detroit Lions.
Right.
You know, Levi Onwuzurike, who's 6'2", 290 pounds, he's another guy who's similar to Leal, but I think Onwuzurike is more strictly a 2 technique for what he's going to do. Now, how that works here in Detroit, we're yet to see. He's going to get on the field, practice this week. He's supposed to play this week coming up. But I think when you look at the rest of his class, it's funny you mentioned Aaron Donald, because there's a guy down at Arizona State by the name of Jermaine Lowell. Mm-hmm. He's kind of out of that Aaron Donald physique, stature, a lot of effort. I'm the toughest guy in the bar fight. Yeah. And it's interesting. I find him interesting because look who he was coached by. And I love guys who have NFL coaching in high school and they get NFL coaching in college. Sure. And I think Lowell is a guy who could creep up boards slowly. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm with you there. I was looking at some of his statistics. He had 18 pressures in 4 games at the defensive tackle position, which is really, really impressive. I agree with you. I think the NFL nowadays is really looking for guys that offer significant pass rush, not just from the defensive ends or your edge rushers. So guys like Aaron Donald, of course, who we've mentioned, Geno Atkins, DeForest Buckner, Chris Jones. Those are all guys that can line up and take on centers and guards and still get to the quarterback effectively and consistently on a week-to-week basis. Jermaine Lowell definitely has that opportunity to really stand out and, be in the conversation and be a top 50 pick. remains to be seen, of course. And another guy that I kind of wanted to mention here briefly was Jordan Davis, the defensive tackle from Georgia. If you're a team that's looking for a mountain of a man, this is your guy. 6'6", 330 pounds. Looking at his tape, he's very, very difficult to move. And he's just a menace in the run game, and it's just going to be tough to run through him. The only thing with him is that he doesn't offer really any pass rush from that position. So that pretty much plummets his value in terms of being a first round pick. Could he be a top 50 pick? Sure. But I think the team that is looking for that kind of player can wait on him a bit. And he has a big test coming up week 1 against Clemson, who just lost Jackson Carman, the guard in the draft. So it'll be interesting to see how he stands out. Georgia's pretty good team. So it'll be exciting to see how he performs.
Yeah, my initial take on this class, because I only went 13 deep so far. I try to evaluate these guys in groups of 13. And pretty much right now, I see it's a very nose tackle heavy draft. You mentioned Jordan Davis, 3-4 nose. You look at a guy like Phil Mathis. Phil Mathis from Alabama he's the wild card in all of this. Right. He's the guy I think who could probably he provides a lot of versatility. At 6'4", 320, he's big enough to play nose in the 3-4. He can play inside. He can take on. I think he can. Yes, he's probably the guy that stands the best chance of jumping guys like Perion Winfrey. You got a guy like Zach Carter from Florida, who's a very, very light guy, but he provides a lot of pass rush possibilities and potential. And you got Corey Durden, also 6'5", 315, senior. He transferred to NC State. He's a guy who I find it kind of difficult to evaluate these Florida State prospects, given where they came from. Now, you look at a guy like Asante Samuel Jr., who he was a bloodline. Right. He had a bloodline that made sure he kept his head on straight down there at Florida State, and he made it out unscathed, and he got drafted high, and he's a hell of a player. For sure. But you look at guys like Marvin Wilson, who I believe had kind of a bad rap there, kind of a raw deal. To go from being a potential top 15 pick to undrafted is outrageous. Right. So, but I think one guy so far that I've noticed on tape that really jumps out to me, he's a senior from Appalachian State, and that's Demetrius Taylor. And it's just different when you get an opportunity to watch seniors play on video, on tape. And this is one of the most patient defensive tackles I've seen. And you can knock the competition if you want, but to me, he's at Appalachian State. They play everybody now. Whether or not everybody wants to play Appalachian State is a completely different story. But this guy, he's great with his hands. He's a karate chopper. That's what I call him. The hands never stop moving. For a guy who's 6'1", 295, he's solid, he's stout. He knows how to drop that anchor, and he knows how to bull rush it. He knows how to be patient. He knows how to maintain and contain his gaps. He's a disciplined player. And I think hopefully right now he's projected as an undrafted free agent. I don't believe that's going to happen. I believe if he has another solid season at App State, by the time the draft rolls around, he could probably be at least a 4th or 5th round. I think that talent is good enough in him. And the 4th or 5th round, 3rd, 4th, 5th round is typically the rounds where teams are okay with taking the low ceiling, high floor guys like him.
Yeah, I'll have to check him out, Walt. I can't say I've really heard of him specifically, but Appalachian State seems to throw in a player in the NFL kind of almost every year. They seem like they do have good talent here and there. Two guys that I definitely want to look forward to this year is Haskell Garrett from Ohio State University. Again, an explosive first step. He just goes right through the line of scrimmage and just makes a play. Even if he's not finishing the play, his teammates chase and they're able to minimize any gain. Question with him is, can he withstand the punishment in the run game? That'll be something that has to be seen with him. And then the other one is Tyler Davis out of Clemson. His freshman year, he had 6.5 sacks, which is really nice. Obviously, Clemson has been producing a lot of talent in the NFL lately. Again, he has a pretty unique challenge coming up first week of the season. So it'll be interesting to see if he can step up and, increase his value as well. So.
Right. So a question.
Yep.
Any of the guys we've talked about, are any of these guys going ahead of Christian Barmore?
I think the only one pretty much at this point would be DeMarvin Leal. I think the question with Barmore last year was if he had the consistent motor on a play-to-play basis. I think DeMarvin Leal does have that a little bit more. I think he might be a little bit quicker. I think he might be better than Barmore. He certainly will be drafted higher, I believe. Whether he's a top 10 pick or not remains to be seen. But so right now, he's the best interior lineman that in the available coming out. So I think so.
Yes, indeed. We won't know until the bullets start flying in a couple weeks. So
absolutely.
And moving on, let's talk about a guy. Listen,
I know how you feel.
We're going to talk about a guy and a team that they have an interesting marriage, very interesting marriage, sort of a shotgun marriage, to a lesser extent. But so Matthew Stafford, as we know, was traded. Longtime Detroit Lions quarterback was traded to the Los Angeles Rams for a small ransom. Both teams feel that they made out pretty good. The Rams got rid of Jared Goff, a guy that they felt was pretty much holding them back from being a championship caliber team and getting back to the Super Bowl. The Detroit Lions were able to get 2 first-round picks and a third last season in this prior draft back in April. So they're able to rebuild their team over the next couple of years, but keeping it on the Rams. What do you think about this season with the Rams?
Well, you and I have had a few discussions a little bit on how we feel about Matt Stafford. The success that he probably didn't have in Detroit now comes to a Rams team that is poised and in the position to win now. It did come at a heavy price. They've been, invested a couple first-round picks that they can't use in the next couple of years. I've always liked Stafford. I think, he has one of the best arms in the league. I feel like he's in a much better situation out in LA. I think the defense is, one of the best defenses in the entire league. Only concern that I have, I know I'm talking about the defense here, but they did lose a few players, like a John Johnson and a Troy Hill, which I'll try to touch on in a moment. So my only concern with them is if the injury bug hits them, pretty much like the same way that it hit the 49ers last year. I think the expectations, to represent, the team in the Super Bowl, I think that goes out the window. He does have a lot of weapons to throw to. There's a lot of speed. The offensive line is pretty decent. They do have an older Andrew Whitworth on at the left tackle position, and one injury to him just kind of changes things. And then, not to mention Cam Akers, unfortunately tearing his Achilles a couple weeks ago. People are ready to kind of see him break out and take over. So I do like it. I do like the fit. I think this Rams offense was being held back a bit by Jared Goff. So it just remains to be seen. Again, everything looks great on paper. But until, like you just said, the bullets start flying, we won't really know. But it's win or I don't know what's going to happen. Heads are going to roll.
Yeah, I think when you look at the Rams as a whole, and you touched on, and we'll touch on the couple guys that they lost to the Browns later on, but I think they're just kind of brushing off losing John Johnson. who was arguably 1A, 1A3, say what, no safeties in the league, and Hill was one hell of a player also. You can't take that away. Um, I just I find it hard to really get behind this team, given the fact that you're so top heavy.
Right.
You've got an elite defensive tackle. You've got an elite corner. You can argue they've got the best corner and the best defensive tackle in football.
Mm-hmm.
But what are you really building around the rest of that? Now, Brad Holmes, who's one hell of a GM and one hell of a scout for talent, maybe we could just give the assumption that he didn't leave the cupboard bare. So, given the fact that they lost guys, there's going to be guys already lined up, ready to take those guys' place. So, they could start next season, and for all we know, they could have, wow, like, who the hell is this guy? And who's this guy? And I thought the Rams were going to struggle.
Right.
But I just think as of right now, they're top heavy. They're very top heavy on defense. Even when you look at them on offense, the offensive line is a question. The running game is a question. You can make the argument that Stafford had better wide receiver cores here in Detroit than he has with the Rams. When you look at Robert Woods, who I love, but Robert Woods is an aging player. Robert Woods is a slot. Cooper Kupp is an excellent player when he's healthy, but he's not a 1, he's a 2. Maybe a 3. We really don't know. You're looking at the aging Deshaun Jackson. You got Van Jefferson, who I really like a lot. Van Jefferson has promise. Tutu Atwell is a guy that they spent. It wasn't a high first round, high pick, but it's high for the Rams, considering the fact that you didn't have much. And you spent that pick on Tutu Atwell.
Right.
So we don't know, was it Goff or was it the league catching up with Sean McVay and his play calling?
Right.
Or is it a combination of both?
Right. Yeah. It's you bring up good points there, Walt. I also questioned the thought process behind drafting Tutu Atwell, a guy who's, I think, was registered under 170 pounds. I mean, the kid can fly, and you have Matt Stafford who can throw the deep ball to him, but I don't really think that was a pick that they needed to invest in. I think they could have addressed, the offensive line or a linebacker or another defensive back or something, but not a Tutu Atwell who's 5'8", 5'9", less than 170 pounds. If he goes across the middle and he gets hit, I mean, a good chance he might get hurt, and there goes that investment. You make also a good point with them being top heavy. Some people don't even think that they're the best team in the division. They think that the 49ers are the best team. The 49ers, with all the injuries that they had last year, are the better team, and arguably so. They do have a more complete defense. They don't have Aaron Donald or Jalen Ramsey. They do have Fred Warner, who's a beast, but they have a more complete defense. And I think if the injury bug were to hit the Rams at some point, I think it would just all go to waste. And the pressure's on. They invested a lot of draft capital into getting Stafford and getting rid of Goff. And if they don't win, if they don't even make the Super Bowl, I mean, it's all going to be for nothing. They have to tear it down at some point. And one last thing, not to mention, they have a new defensive coordinator, Raheem Morris, who's really good. But new system, who knows how players are going to kind of react to it and how they're going to play with it.
Yeah, and I think, when you look at the pressure factor, Matthew Stafford never had any real pressure on him here in Detroit. Everyone knows the history of futility with this franchise. So pretty much anything he could do, considering the fact that he took over a team that was 0-16 the year prior to him getting here, anything he could do. And he struggled the first 2 years with injuries. So, this town was really down on him after those first 2 years. He had to bounce back here in 2000. Was it 2000? Well, off the top, man, I'm not even going to lie about the year. Because I'm terrible with years. But his third season in the league, he won Comeback Player of the Year. He made the Pro Bowl. That was the year we went to the playoffs against the Saints and got our asses handed to us. Yep. But the thing is that, after that playoff loss, And after that season of promise the Lions showed, everyone in Detroit and pretty much outside of Detroit, the state of Michigan thought that, this Lions team was on the rise. This Lions team would be back. And we never were back. We went back to the playoffs twice. And that's crazy that after that playoff loss to the Saints, he managed to, not just him, and I'm not going to blame all of this on him, but they managed to get back to the playoffs just twice after that Saints loss. So I think going from Detroit, where the media pretty much hounded you every single day, every Monday, to what's going on with the Rams, where it's either win or go home, it's not just make the playoffs, Stafford. It's not just make the playoffs and win a game, Stafford, the way it was here in Detroit. It's you need to get to the Super Bowl and outdo Jared Goff. Because whether people want to admit it or not, this is who he's compared to.
Yep.
Like, he has to eclipse what Jared Goff eclipsed. And in Sean McVay's situation, his case, he has to prove that, okay, you blamed everything for this young man. You publicly threw him under the bus during the season. You publicly threw him under the bus after a playoff loss. I mean, what else is there to say about it? You have to prove that it wasn't you, it was him. And, you look at things that things that have been said coming out of Rams camp during off-season workouts is, Stafford's arm, and I've never seen a guy sling it like this. And now we can completely open up the playbook. And, to me, it seems like a situation that's destined to fail. Because if they don't pull this off within the first 2 years, I think both of them are gone. Because I don't see McVay, after you were able to convince this organization to mortgage their future for this man. They mortgaged the small future for Jalen Ramsey.
Yep.
So you mortgage someone else's future for Matthew Stafford, and it doesn't work. So if it didn't work after the first 2 years, I can see McVay being fired. And I can see Stafford being gone just for the simple fact Stafford will be 2 more years older, and are the Rams really going to give him a brand new contract at the age that he's at? But do they have a choice, because they have no draft capital to move up and get anybody? So that organization handcuffed themselves. It's either win the Super Bowl or bust.
And they do have the advantage that they have is that the NFC isn't that difficult. You have the Bucs, who are at the top, and then you have the Packers, and then I think it's pretty much everybody else. So I think they do have that. They don't have to go through the AFC, which is an absolute gauntlet. So I think they have a chance because the NFC is a little bit weaker. And then the other question too really is, none of this means anything if Stafford isn't on the field. If he starts taking some hits and he gets injured again,
true.
I mean, you have to go to your backup quarterback, and and the lack of a strong running game, even with the weapons that you have, it's not going to be pretty. I mean, I know, looking at it here, October 24th, they're hosting your Lions. Jared Goff is going to come in with something to prove, and he's going to want to tee off on those guys. So, I mean, McVay, there's a lot of pressure on McVay to make this work. It is Super Bowl or bust for them. He might be given the benefit of the doubt if things maybe crumble, because he is a really, really good offensive mind. But if he's the one, making some calls and saying, hey, listen, I need to improve this quarterback position, and it doesn't work, then yeah, I agree. He might be on his way out, and maybe even the GM Les Snead is probably on the way out too. So
but then you're in a situation where who the hell wants that job? You have no draft capital, you have no quarterback. You got a high price defensive tackle, and I have no issue with Aaron Donald. Pay Aaron Donald his money.
Absolutely.
And if you're great at your job, you deserve everything you make, every penny you make. But just another thing with the Rams is the fact that, like you said, the division. You got to compete with Russell Wilson. You got to compete with Frisco. You got to compete with the Cardinals, who we believe are an up-and-coming team. I think one thing that really stood out to me about the Rams this season. The final 8 games of the season for them is brutal. You know, you look at from November 7th to January 9th, they've got Tennessee, San Francisco, Green Bay, Jacksonville, Arizona, Seattle, Minnesota, Baltimore, Frisco again.
It's tough.
So, yeah, that's those are some rough matchups. Those are some rough matchups. So, I mean, it's possible. I'm not a believer of it now. They could prove me wrong, but I just think it's too rough. It's too rough of a tread this season.
Yeah, and I mean those last couple games look pretty tough, and I mean even the first 4 are still maybe even the first 5 are going to be tough too. I mean they still have to host Chicago. Chicago's not an easy out on defense, and if Justin Fields proves that he can be an effective passer, which the Bears haven't had forever, that's going to be a tough. Then they go to Indianapolis week 2. Who knows if we're going to see Carson Wentz, and then they are back home hosting Tampa. That's going to be a statement game. It's only week 3,
True.
but that's going to determine whether this team is for real, if they can hang with them and beat them. Then they have the Cardinals, and then they have at Seattle before they head out over to the East Coast to face my Giants. But the schedule doesn't present a ton of easy outs. So they have a lot to prove. They really do. They might not even be the best team in the division, but we'll see.
Yeah, and then you notice by chance of luck they play the NFC North this season.
Yeah,
which every team knows him.
Mm-hmm.
The Bears know him. Mike Zimmer knows him. Nagy knows him. Green Bay has always known him. So like these are all factors I think that will all play in. But like I said, we'll see.
Absolutely.
We'll see. So let's move on to Think that. So what do you think about the AFC?
So we briefly talked about
when it comes to the Browns. Not the Browns necessarily, but the biggest threat to the Chiefs in the AFC.
Well, you did mention it just now. It is, when I look at the AFC, it's tough. It's deep. The Colts are going to be there. The Titans got better somehow. Not somehow, but they just got better on offense. That's a potent offense. Defense has a few question marks, but I think they'll be okay. The Ravens are going to be in the mix. The Steelers are still going to be in the mix. Buffalo's there. Miami has an up-and-coming team. They won 10 games. Who's to say that they can't win more? For me, the biggest threat right now to Kansas City is the Cleveland Browns. I can't believe I'm saying it, but it's the Cleveland Browns. The way that general manager Andrew Berry has built this team is nothing short of impressive. I generally feel like he could win executive of the year for the job that he's done. He took he took a secondary that was fairly decent. He had Denzel Ward already in the mix, who played really well his rookie year. Kind of has fallen off just a little bit. But to add Greedy Williams, who's going to have something to prove, to drafting Greg Newsome in the first round this past offseason. And then in free agency to add John Johnson III, who is a safety that nobody really talks about. And then adding Troy Hill. I mean, that secondary is loaded. It's just unbelievable. And to add pieces like Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, who could rotate in at safety as well. And then not to mention Grant Delpit, who tore his Achilles last year, didn't really get to make an impact. He's going to be, coming in trying to prove his worth as well. Oh yeah, and you might have heard of a guy named Myles Garrett. He's still on the team.
Might be the best defensive player in football.
Might be. Yep. And you add help by bringing in Jadeveon Clowney, who isn't the pass rusher that people thought he was going to be, but he's still somebody that you have to put a hat on. That team defensively, to me, has the manpower and the talent to limit Kansas City offensively. I mean, last year, I think it was the score was like 22-15 in the divisional round between the two teams on the road in Kansas City. So that showed me that Cleveland can hang with them. Now their offensive line is excellent, probably the best offensive line in the entire league. Their rushing attack with Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt is just unbelievable. And that's what you want to have in November and December heading into the playoffs, is just a run game that's just going to steamroll people. And we just have to wait and see if Baker Mayfield really takes it to the next level now in the second year under Kevin Stefanski. Same offense, doesn't have to learn anything new. With those playmakers, they're just a very, very deep team. So it wouldn't surprise me to talk about the Cleveland Browns as being top of the AFC.
Yeah, we completely agree on this. We discussed it prior to the show. My thing with Cleveland, and like when I look at the offense, I kind of worry, what if it's one of those games where things aren't falling, in order. The dominoes aren't falling in order for you defensively, and you got to really get into that shootout. Because we already know they've got probably the best running back tandem in football. They got the best offensive line in football. That right there is a mixture for really solid December football. And then they're solid on defense. So my question is, Odell Beckham Jr., what are we really going to see from him? Over the past 2 seasons, Odell has kind of become sort of an afterthought. And granted, you look at what happened with the Giants and Eli Manning kind of stinking the final few years there. And, they just couldn't get things right. Davis Webb showed up and things were going on with the organization that, he didn't particularly care for. And, he powdered his way out. He didn't do himself any justice. I'll just say that. I don't think it was all Odell's issue, but I do think Odell has some issues that he probably needs to clean up. So it brings me back to saying, if Odell shows up and he falls in line, and it's a situation where, I'm the most talented wide receiver in football. I'm here to put us completely over the damn top. I don't care about 11, 12, 13 targets a game. I want to win, and I want to be a major reason why we win. There's nobody that should be able to beat that Cleveland Browns team, because they have the ability to checkmate you at everything that you do.
Yep.
Oh, you want to run the football? No, that's not going to happen. Our front four won't allow it.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, well, you want to throw the football? No, we're back on the deep end. We're going to lock you down on the outside, and we're going to lock everything down. And we can play cover 1, and we can play some cover 3, and we can do whatever you want to do. So it's Stefanski is in year 2. Is he going to regress? Are things going to continue to move forward? There's still some issues. There's some questions with Cleveland. Like, this is still a baby team.
Right.
They're young. And they're kind of similar to me. I compared them to Carolina over in the NFC, who I think did a ton to improve their team. And they got great, youth-wise. But I expect really good things, really great things from Carolina this year. But I'm kind of iffy because they're so young and they have a second-year head coach. And Cleveland is in the exact same situation. So are we a year early with Cleveland? Did Cleveland peak a year too early?
Right. They certainly have questions. I think the playoff experience really helped. I think I would feel less optimistic about them this year had they lost in the wild card round to Pittsburgh. But the way that they just walked into their stadium and just embarrassed them on live TV, and then hung in with Kansas City. And if you remember, Walt, there was a play towards the end zone. I forget who was carrying the rock. It might have been Jarvis Landry. I'm not really sure. But they fumbled outside of the end zone. I mean, they were on the doorsteps to score. That turned the tide of the game in a sense, because I believe they struggled at that point to score afterwards. So I don't want to say that they peaked yet. I think they just got they got a lot better in the offseason. A lot of this is going to ride on Baker Mayfield because he has everything in front of him to succeed. He has the same offensive line, run game, and wide receivers everywhere. He has tight ends that can get open. That's the question that really needs to be answered with the Cleveland Browns is Baker Mayfield. And there's talk, whether Andrew Berry's going to want to open the checkbook and give him an extension. Well, this is the year to really show that. And it doesn't get better than week 1 when they travel to Kansas City. So that, again, only week 1, but that's a statement game. If they can go in there and they can hang with them and maybe even put more points and, maybe even a potential blowout, which I don't see happening, but that it could prove, it could show that they're a team to be messed with. So, a lot of good things coming up for Cleveland. If guys can step up, like, if Odell can lock in and be a team player and just keep his head down and work, then, man, the sky's the limit for Cleveland, man. I can't believe I'm saying it, but it is.
Anybody else in the AFC outside of them?
The other team I would say is Buffalo. They had a little bit of a scare in the wild card game. Phillip Rivers, at the time being the Colts quarterback, came in and what turned out to be his final game, he really left it all out on the field, and they almost upset him, which I think was a shock to the system. The second round, I think they took care of Baltimore pretty easily. Once with Lamar Jackson, and he still has to grow with his ability to throw. I think that's what's going to hold the Baltimore Ravens back still. That's why I believe Buffalo is the other team that really can be in the mix. They were in the AFC Championship game last year, so for them it's really Super Bowl or bust. You have Josh Allen that was playing at just an insane level. I mean, he could have been MVP, honestly, and he might play like that again this year. Second year with Stephon Diggs now. Only thing that I don't think they have that Cleveland has is the run game. Zach Moss and Devin Singletary don't really present that scare that's going to keep defensive coordinators up at night. Our offensive line is pretty good. Defensively, they have some studs. Trey White, Tremaine Edmonds at linebacker. The safety duo of Jordan Poyer and Micah Hyde is really, really formidable. It didn't seem like they addressed really the cornerback position opposite Trey White, which I think is still going to be somewhat of a sore spot, which is something that Cleveland has numbers in and strength and talent in. But it remains to be seen if Josh Allen plays at that level, he's hard to stop. So that's my other team in the AFC. How about you?
Well, you're gonna think I'm one team I believe can honestly do it is Cleveland. That's it. I don't think the Browns, not the Browns. I don't think that the Ravens are explosive enough. I don't think even if they get better offensively this year and get more explosive down the field this year, it's still with a bunch of young guys, a bunch of young receivers. You see Bateman's hurt right now, as it is. Mm-hmm. So I think the Browns are still the Ravens are still a very solid team. You have to give them respect. You know they're going to be right there in the mix later on. I think when you look at Buffalo, instead of them really addressing the big issue, to me, with them last year defensively, which was the run, stopping the run, they went out, they took kind of a luxury pick with Greg Rousseau. Rousseau could turn out to work out, and I believe it all comes down to how they use Greg Rousseau. I don't think they can just line Greg Rousseau up at 4 technique or 5 technique all day. Because on a matchup standpoint, from Sunday to Sunday, he's going to see a variety of different left tackles and right tackles, and his size and his frame isn't going to be able to match up against these guys. He's athletic enough. I don't think he's strong enough right now at the point of attack to really handle these type of NFL tackles week in, week out. Also, I agree. They didn't really address the cornerback position, opposite Trey White. And if you look at offensively, to me, they didn't really fix the run game. I think they're going to just go and they're going to keep treading Devin Singletary out there, who's a solid back when he's healthy. But when you had guys like Javonte Williams staring at you in the draft, you had the kid from Alabama, you had Travis Etienne from Clemson. There were backs on the board. There were backs later on in the draft. You could have took a Chuba Hubbard, and I understood people were pretty low on Chuba Hubbard now for various reasons. He also looked pretty solid not against Carolina. He looked solid for Carolina.
He did.
So I think Buffalo they brushed off their weaknesses. They didn't really fix them. That's why I think Buffalo's in a situation where they're behind Cleveland. But one more question: how important is home field advantage for the Browns?
I think it's pretty important. We've seen. I mean, from what we've seen on TV, that's a hungry fan base, man. I mean, even when they were so bad, they still came out and they still represented their team because they really did believe and they really want to see a winner out in Cleveland. And it was unfortunate, obviously, last year with the pandemic. Fans not being able to go to the game in certain stadiums. I'm telling you, I think, Cleveland is going to be rocking this year if they're allowed to have all of their fans in, which I'm assuming that's still in place. I think it really matters for them. The difference between going out to Kansas City in a playoff game versus hosting them in those, daunting conditions that's presented in Cleveland every year in the fall and winter. I think that plays a huge factor. So, I think it matters. One other team that I really wanted to touch on really quick that nobody is really talking about as much is the Denver Broncos. They could be one of those teams that makes a run if everything clicks. That defense is for real. They have playmakers. They have talent at running back with Javonte Williams, and Melvin Gordon's no scrub either. It all falls on Drew Lock, I should say. If he can figure it out, and he showed up the preseason week 1 against the Vikings. If he can prove that he is the guy, that team is going to surprise a bunch of people and fast.
Yeah, well, if he's going to do it, it has to be this year.
Yeah, I agree.
He's not getting another year, and
no, he's out.
I think they desperately wanted to be him because it's not Teddy.
Mm-hmm.
We all know what Teddy's there for. So, yeah, I mean, I like the Broncos. I think they've done a damn good job of filling out that roster pretty much over the last couple seasons. They just can't seem to, nail that quarterback position. But
nope, they can't figure it out.
Can't, but. Hey, the sun don't shine, the sun don't shine.
Yeah, so, that's true.
All right, so moving on to the New York Giants.
My squad.
How do you feel about the Giants? I'm going to let you talk about this. Because I got a few questions to ask. I'm going to let you jump straight into it. Start with the offense.
Critical to the overall team success this year. It's make or break for Daniel Jones. I know Dave Gettleman was talking about today, answering some questions about how, they have ammo now in the first round next year to potentially go up and get their guy, a new guy. And he said he hasn't even thought about that. I don't really buy into that. I think Daniel Jones knows that this is his chance to show that he's worth the 6th overall pick. I know the bullseye's on him. The bullseye's also on Andrew Thomas going into his second year at left tackle. He was the first offensive tackle drafted last year ahead of Mekhi Becton, Jedrick Willis, Tristan Wirfs. And in terms of how he performed, if you wanted to rank them, he was 4th. He came on towards the end of the year, but a lot of pressures on him to protect Daniel Jones, give him time to throw the ball, block for, in the run game. I saw their game the other night on Saturday, and Andrew Thomas looked good. He looked really, really nice in pass protection. He wasn't getting beat, and he was anchoring pretty well. So, yeah, it's going to ride a lot on the offense, and Jason Garrett, more notably. He just has to. Oh, thinking. Got you, Walt.
Got you.
Okay, yeah. I just kept talking. So a lot of this is also going to fall on Jason Garrett. It wasn't a very pretty showing last year with the offense. So if it starts off poorly, I would anticipate that they're going to make a change at some point.
Okay. First of all, just being on the outside looking in, what happened and why did Andrew Thomas get picked ahead of those other studs?
I think what they looked at was his overall body of work, playing a premium position in the SEC, which just breeds NFL talent, as we all know, going against the best pass rushers week in and week out, facing guys on Alabama, facing guys on Florida. I think that's what they were really intrigued by. I know a lot of scouts and draft guys were, slotting him a little bit lower. I was happy with the pick. I thought the guy does play with the mean streak. But over time, it obviously proved that the other guys just played a lot better. Tristan Wirfs definitely, for being the fourth one taken, probably was the best one out of the bunch. So I think that's what they were looking at. Obviously, Jedrick Willis was playing in the SEC as well. But it seemed like it took him a little bit to get comfortable. But towards the end of the year, he looked like he just played with a different attitude, and just a lot of things were cleaned up. And I know it's obviously preseason and stuff, and regular season is going to matter the most. But he looked pretty good in his first action with the starters. So, maybe it'll pay off.
Yeah. So, I'm a very big pusher of taking care of your quarterback.
Yep.
When I look at Daniel over the past couple seasons, when he's got protection, I understand you can say this about a ton of quarterbacks in the league, but when he's got protection, he makes solid plays and he makes big throws. He's not just a guy down there just trying to check down everything. Daniel he'll take the gun downfield. Mm-hmm. So I just felt like they just didn't do enough to really help him, given the fact that, Saquon Barkley was hurt. That's one weapon he lost. You look at the wide receiver position. That wide receiver position was a mash unit. You look at the tight end position. Evan Ingram, ultra talented. Is he anything more than just ultra talented? Physically talented. So I think they're trying to help him. They brought in Kenny Golladay from here. I think Kenny Golladay, you're gonna love him as long as he's on the field and he's healthy. He can't separate for shit, but he's great. He's great in contested catches. He's great at contested catches. He's a Brandon Marshall type of player. I'm not going to separate too much, but if the ball is anywhere in my vicinity, I'm going to catch it. You're going to love him as long as he's on the field. I think he's going to be great for Daniel Jones. I kind of felt they could have went offensive line early in this draft if they wanted to. I didn't understand the Kadarius Toney pick. Given some of the receivers that were still on the board, if you wanted to go receiver, I understand he's great after the catch. He's a human joystick or whatever, but I didn't really understand the Kadarius Toney selection at all. But when I look at you guys defensively, you bring it. Dexter Lawrence is great. I think things started to turn around when they got him. Going back to Clemson, I felt when the big issue, the question was who was the best. Dexter Lawrence, Christian Wilkins, or Cleveland Farrell. Farrell went before all of them, fourth overall.
Surprisingly.
Wilkins may be on the verge of being out of Miami, and Dexter Lawrence is obviously the best player. But Dexter was downplayed because Dexter was a nose tackle, and Dexter could pretty much play nose tackle in the 3-4 if you needed him to.
Right.
So I like there. I like what you guys did in the secondary. Adoree Jackson, Bradbury turned his career around. He really turned out to be a steal for you guys.
Mm-hmm.
So I like the positions of need you guys addressed. I think the offensive line is still kind of up in the air. You don't know about Joe Judge, and look who's really calling the shots upstairs. So kind of iffy on the Giants. I think you look at that division.
Yep.
I'm not sure if you're better than Washington. And when I look at Dallas, could you be better than Dallas? Could you guys have more stability than Dallas and turn out to be better than Dallas? I believe you could probably be better than Dallas. That's because Dallas is such a Jekyll and Hyde team.
Yeah.
You look at Dallas on paper and you assume Dallas is going to win 11, 12, 13 games, and then they give you that same old 6.
Yep.
Right. So,
the accident waiting to happen, as Stephen A. says.
So yeah, it's.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Giants front office did everything possible to help out Daniel Jones, bringing in Kenny Golladay, drafting a Kadarius Toney. I was thinking that they were probably going to take a guy like a Rashad Bateman, and I was too surprised. I was also surprised when they drafted Kadarius Toney. The pick grew on me, as it always does. Being a fan, you're going to wind up rooting for them anyway. Brian Kyle Rudolph over from Minnesota. The guy doesn't drop anything. To maybe light a little fire under Evan Ingram. Like you said, Evan Ingram is, just a hell of an athlete. And he's really tough to run with. It's just when the lights come on, man, it just seems to just not be there. Something's off in that sense. I was in terms of the offensive line. Will Hernandez started at right guard this past week. He had been playing left guard for most of his career. Turns out that he lost about 20 pounds this offseason. Looks like he changed his diet, his training, and he looked really, really good at right guard. The position that is a bit of a sore spot right now is the left guard position, which was him. We traded Kevin Zeitler away over to the Ravens. Not sure how I still feel about that. I know money was an issue with him. And Nick Gates returns at center, and he got really, really he got a lot better towards the end of the year. Guy plays with the just absolute mean streak. So I'm just hoping that second year with this offense and just the experience that this team had, keep in mind none of the teams had their typical off season. And I had these thoughts in my head that teams that were experienced and had veteran leadership were going to thrive in a season like last year, whereas teams like the Giants, who had a bunch of new faces, new head coaches, new schemes, were going to take time to gel. So now with this full off season, granted it's minus one preseason game, I think is going to do wonders for them now, especially when you saw some improvement late. And then in terms of the defense, yeah, I mean, it's, having Xavier McKinney hopefully healthy for a full year is going to be huge. Logan Ryan is an excellent veteran to have in your locker room. He knows exactly what he's doing. He knows how to line guys up. Darnay Holmes is a slot guy for us that has to clean up his holding issues. He was called a bunch of times on defensive holding, but he didn't give up any touchdowns, and he wasn't really beat a lot in coverage. So, and then we have the rookie Azeez Ojulari out of Georgia, who can rush the passer. And then Carter Coughlin, who was a day 3 pick last year, is in line to line up next to Blake Martinez for inside linebacker starting reps. And he showed out this past Saturday. So this Giants defense has a chance to be the best in the division. I know you referenced Washington football team. If they can hang with them, I mean, we beat them twice last year. Yeah, they upgraded at quarterback essentially, and that defensive line is no joke with Chase Young and company and Montez Sweat and those guys. That's going to be just a dogfight with them. Dallas offensively, yeah, they're a problem on offense. Defense, I don't know if they can keep up. And then Philly, a lot of people are kind of projecting them to finish last, but who knows? They could surprise. Jalen Hurts looked pretty decent. Now, if Devontae Smith can stay healthy, that's huge. Obviously, that was their first round pick. I don't know if defensively they have enough to withstand a now 17 game schedule. So it's going to be tough. I could definitely see a team barely being over 500 winning the division, but who knows?
All right, quick last question. Saquon Barkley, do you pay him or not?
I think you have to pay him.
Have to?
If you're Dave Gettleman and you want to keep your job, I feel like you have to, because then he has to face the music and say that pick was a waste. I don't think you can take him second overall and not give him a second contract. I think that to me is front office malpractice, if you ask me. But
well, he has been hurt. But how much you gonna pay him? You gotta think about the ticket, though, Steven. Like, how much you gonna pay him?
Yeah, that's the big question. I hope he wants to take a team friendly discount. But at the end of the day, you also don't blame the guy or any player for looking out for themselves and demanding the money that they deserve. And he's arguably one of the best backs in the league when healthy. I don't know, Walt. To be honest with you, I have no idea what's going to happen. They're obviously going to exercise the option, and he's going to be brought back for a fifth year. In terms of the second contract, if he does what he did his first year, I can see them giving maybe a 4 or 5 year contract. If not, might play it safer with maybe a 3. I don't know if he takes 3. It's just that never-ending question of the value of the running back, whether you pay them or not. If you pay them and they don't do well, we told you so. But guys like him are hard to come by with his athleticism and his skill set. Your guess is as good as mine. Well, I don't know.
Any chance they trade him anytime soon or later?
If they're playing really, really poorly, I can see that decision being considered. I hope that they don't play poorly. I know Vegas has them kind of like at 7 wins. I think they're better than that. I don't think they trade him. Even if those questions arise, I don't think they trade him. I think the backlash from the fan base would be a lot, and ownership and the front office would have a lot of answering to do. And I just don't think it would be good optics for the team. If you want to address that in the offseason, by all means, but I don't think during in season would be a good idea.
I agree. Well, that's it. That's a wrap. I want to thank everyone who tuned in, watching to the first annual episode of Goats and Rings, your everything football podcast. We'll be covering NFL, college, and even a little high school football sprinkled in there from time to time. So join us next week. Take care.